But yeah, welcome everyone. Apologies for the slight delay, but we are here now, and like hugely warm welcome, and thank you to all of you for your contributions and support for this special issue of the Journal of Learning Development in Higher Education. I think so. I'll start off by saying who I am, that would be helpful. So I'm Kelly-Louise, I'm the Head of Educator Development at the University of Exeter, and I was a lead guest editor on this special issue, and worked very closely with my colleagues, two of whom are on the call. So we've got Karen Kenny, James Anthony Edwards, and then our colleagues Eleanor Hodgson and Rachel Sloan, who couldn't be with us today. I'll leave them to introduce themselves a little bit later. But before we kind of kick off, I wanted to say a couple of things about where this kind of the idea to do this special issue came from for us as a team. So we're all professional services colleagues at the University of Exeter who identify as working in the third space, and we work closely together on a number of things. Karen, Eleanor and I are in the same team, but we work kind of cross services and have had a lot of discussion over the years that we've been working at the university about being a third space professional, having come from an academic background for some of us, and our experiences in terms of building trust and good relationships with our academic colleagues who are in faculties, or those that don't work in a central unit like we do, but also thinking about how we continue to develop ourselves as professionals. And one of the kind of reasons we came to this is that we collectively as a group have always kind of supported each other in sharing our practice and publishing about our practice in particular, because there are kind of a group of us at the institution and professional services who continue to encourage each other to do that if that is what we desire to do. We don't force anyone. And Dawn Lees, who was part of this journal at the start, she was really the person when I started here 10 years ago who encouraged me to continue presenting at conferences, writing about my practice as a member of the third space. And so we had kind of lots of discussions about what our experience was, but also really a desire to provide more opportunities for those working in those third spaces to share and publish their practice. Because we know from our networks and experiences across the sector that there's so much knowledge and so much richness happening in this third space with third space professionals that is largely unsung and largely unheard about. And certainly, we know from experience that there aren't always those support structures and routes into publishing if you haven't come from an academic background. And so part of the sort of motivation for the journal was creating conversation around being a third space professional, and kind of taking those informal conversations we had and turning them into a journal edition for the sector, but also providing those opportunities for development for those in third space who would like to start publishing and thinking about their practice. Obviously, JLDHE was the perfect space for that in the way that they support and encourage new authors and those new to publishing. And obviously we've had so much support from Tom and Alicia and the whole team throughout this process. It's been quite a learning curve, I think, for all of us, in part because the response we got was rather larger than we were expecting, which was wonderful, but created quite a learning curve for us. And so it's actually been a really great developmental process for us as well, as editors, in compiling and shaping these articles and learning about the fantastic things that are going on in the sector. So as I said, we got a lot of responses. And so we, as you'll probably have seen, we themed the issue. So we kind of organized the articles around 4 themes. They were collaboration and partnerships, identity and positioning, leadership, influence and credibility, and then finally careers and professional development. And these are the kind of the four themes that we used to kind of group some of the articles together to help everyone navigate, I guess, the volume of contributions and fantastic contributions in the special issue. We're going to talk about each of these themes a little bit, and I'm going to hand over to James and Karen at different points. But I think the thing that I wanted to raise as we start is the kind of, in our guest editorial, we came to a kind of call to action as it were, which is that our reflection from reading all of these fantastic contributions from across the sector is really the potential in the third space to provide wider institutional leadership, and the need for clearer career and progression opportunities and training and development opportunities for those in third space roles to progress into senior management roles, because actually we have a huge amount of knowledge to share, but also an incredible skill set, which is evidenced throughout all of these articles, and they are highly valued skills and highly necessary skills in this kind of increasing era of challenge and complexity. We're never without a challenge. COVID, finances, you name it. And actually, what we saw in these articles is that people in the third space really have the agility, the flexibility, the collaboration skills and networks to operate really well in those senior roles, and they could bring huge value to them. And that's something that kind of we'd like to filter throughout today in thinking about how all of these different themes and contributions to the special issue contribute to that kind of that call, really, to provide those clearer progression routes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take kind of each of the themes one by one. One of us will give a short introduction, and then we'll open to some discussion. I know, because I can see your names, that there are many, many of our authors from the special edition on the call. So we might start a conversation, but please, anybody, particularly those who contributed to the journal, please do chip in and add your thoughts and add your experiences based on your contributions. We would really, really love to hear from you, because that's been, I think, the real value of this experience from us, is what we have learned from all of you. So I think we're going to talk about collaboration and partnerships first. So I'm going to hand over to James.
Thanks, Kelly-Louise. So yeah, it probably won't surprise any of you to know that collaboration and partnership came out really, really strongly. I mean, it was when we were coming up with the themes of the issue, we went through all sorts of permutations of different things, but collaboration was like the one that was just never ever in doubt. It was more kind of, is it so big that it needs to be other things? But I think there were a number of things that came out for us that I just want to pick out some key things, not actually in this journal, but published nicely alongside in Higher Education Policy, and I will pop the DOI in the chat. A kind of scoping review of third space professionals that really kind of backs up what we found in editing this special issue, which is collaboration is just kind of really central part of being a third space professional. And alongside that, and something that a number of our authors reflected on, was collaboration being added to the professional standards framework by Advance HE, which I think just shows that it's absolutely needed. I think it's particularly needed for third space professionals because of the nature of that relationship, but it's actually needed for everybody, because collaboration is not a one-way thing. Whether or not you're a third space professional, you need to be able to collaborate with third space professionals and other people. And I'd just like to highlight, I think, a few things that came out for me from some of the articles. One was the kind of the need to make yourself uncomfortable, which came out of Edgley and Crawford's article. Just that we see it, but that working with people to really test what your understanding of collaboration is, and really dug under the skin of what is understood by it, and being prepared to be challenged on it. Because if you're working with people from a different background, whether you be an academic, a third space professional, someone in professional services who says, I just do this and I'm not third space, I'm just me. I think that really having yourself tested was kind of a key theme. Then there were some interesting points in Ullman Davis's paper where they looked at mental health initiatives and collaboration, and just one of those things that I think we all kind of know intuitively, but just one of the real values of collaboration particularly between academics and third space professionals, is that sharing of knowledge and different expertise. So an academic can bring the pedagogic expertise, a third space professional can bring that subject expertise, if you like, but also that understanding of how to fit it in. I think that was really, really key. And then some of the challenges and the different motivations, and motivations came up in different papers. You know, for first space professionals, the motivations often are about getting out the work they're doing. There was a phrase which recurred, which was getting your foot in the door. Yeah, being able to collaborate is a way of getting your foot in the door to be able to deliver the things that you are supposed to be delivering. And for academics, it was a way of drawing on expertise that they wouldn't have and providing something better for their students and improving education. But also, and this particularly came through in Cornford's paper, some of the obstacles, you know, around, some of these go to the value of education, particularly in comparison to research, but just that challenge of time, priorities, and recognizing the value of third space professionals who aren't academics. And that's something that comes up. So really, I think the kind of key things I'd like to look at are, and just kind of chuck out there, are what are those other key skills and how can we make it better? You know, for me, one of the things this special edition is trying to do, as Kelly said, is start a conversation. Now, that conversation is all about how do we improve things. So my kind of starter for 10 would be, what are the skills people think are out there? But crucially, how do we improve collaboration? What does it take? And what are people's experiences? And I'd really like to hear good and bad experiences from people. So I'm just going to chuck it out there and go, people, stick your yellow hand up. Melanie, go for it.
Hello, just turning my camera on. Yeah, from my perspective anyway, and I'm sure there's many people on here similar positions. I work as an academic skills tutor at Arden University, and it's for us, it's about highlighting our presence. You know, we support students all the way up to level 7, very often with dissertations. They're not getting the best advice or patchy advice from various supervisors, whatever the issue may be, but we do a lot of really good work that is invisible, and I don't think many other departments are necessarily aware of what we do, and sometimes our roles get blended in with other, like peer mentor type thing, you know, and a lot of the academics at the university, I think, are not as aware of what we can offer. And many of us are doctors in our own rights. We have published, you know, so yeah. Not sure if anybody else has any experiences like that.
Any ideas on how you've managed to get that cut through, Melanie? Because that is one of the big challenges, is how do you get attention? What works?
Yeah, I guess for me it's building relationships with those lecturers that I work with, because we go into centre, we mostly work remotely and support students like this on Zoom and or Teams, but then we also go in and deliver embedded sessions alongside the lecturers for things like Harvard referencing and academic skills support, and where that happens you start to build relationships. It's about building relationships, isn't it, you know, with those individuals who are part of their wider teams, and I suppose they spread the word that way. I'm affiliated to the apprenticeships department at the university as well, so we're starting to sit in on their teamly meetings so that we can offer support that way to the apprenticeship coaches, for example, who aren't necessarily academics, who are helping the students build their portfolios, but they don't necessarily know about academic skills and that sort of thing. So trying to just raise our profile, I guess, through things like that, and training courses across the university, whereby we're also delivering a series of little videos now that introduce our team and our services. Those are being delivered across the university as well. It's ridiculous really that we've got to shout about it. You'd think people would just know, but they don't, and I think that's it. It's communication, I guess.
Yeah, bro, excellent. I think it's always communication. Right, I'm going to go to Yvonne, then Tanya, then Sarah. And Kelly's adding comments to chat, and I would say if you don't want to appear on camera, you don't want to talk, do pop things in the chat.
Hi, so I work at Teesside University in academic skills, a learning and development advisor, and work very closely with a team of academic librarians. So quite lucky that they often get to meet all the new academics and they can explain what's available. But I think sometimes it's, they think, oh, you know, somebody can come in and cover academic writing or cover critical writing. But what we've started to do is, if somebody's asked about that and it's me doing it, I will go to them and say, right, do you want to send me the criteria for the assignment? And then I can relate that critical writing to the specifics of that criteria to try and make it more relevant to the students. And I think some of the academics didn't know that I could do that. They just thought I would talk generically. And I think once they're starting to hear that, yes, I can cover the basics, but then make it specifically relevant, hopefully that is now starting to get around. It's particularly in one of the schools in our School of Health, that it's more than just, we'll just repeat the same old thing on critical writing every time. We'll help the students relate it to what they actually have to do. And I think that can help as well.
Yeah, that's certainly something we've seen here at Exeter is people knowing that actually you're not just there to do the absolute basics they assume, and they see the value of it. Dead true. Tanya.
Yes, I was just going to add a few things. I think some of this has been said in the chat a little bit, but certainly, sorry, I work at the University of Warwick and I train career practitioners. We have a course there that we run in conjunction with AGCAS, which is the Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services. But I've spent about 25 years in careers practice within higher education before that, and was very fortunate to do a fair few research projects. And I think my experience is very much about finding the champions that will back you. And I think if you can get that at the right level, I think if you go too senior, then people don't have time to spend with you. If you have something like a teaching and learning dean or somebody around that mark to get behind you, I think that really helps. But I think it also comes with some challenges, because I think you have to navigate, you have to think about their agendas, what they're trying to achieve, and how that connects with what you want to do. And also, so in a way, sort of try and help them solve their problems, but not actually compromise what you want to do too much either. And at the same time, I think it's also navigating the politics of why they're doing that and why you're doing that, and making sure you don't tread on each other's toes too much. Because I think I've been in situations where people have taken the glory of the work I've done, basically, of the hard work I've done, and actually come unstuck. They've come unstuck as well, which has been quite interesting, quite amusing on occasions. But I think finding somebody who's fair-minded, who really wants to share that with you, and not basically, do the political, running away with the glory at the end of it is really important, I think.
Yeah, I think it's essential. I'm going to hand off to Kelly-Louise, and then Katie, and then Kelly-Louise is going to tell me when we're out of time to stay on track to move to Karen.
Probably need to move imminently, but I was just going to say, as I said in the chat, like 100%, that's been my experience as well. And like, I remember when I started in the role that I'm in now, I'd been working really closely with our then Dean for Taught Students, Rob Freethy, and we had presented the outcome of some work that I had supported him on in a very senior meeting. And, we had the registrar and some of the highest kind of level people in the university, and they were congratulating Rob on the work that he had done. And he interrupted them and said, "Thank you, but the majority of the work here was Kelly and her team." And I had never experienced that before, where a senior leader actually interrupted other senior leaders, telling them what a good job they'd done, to actually call out the contribution of professional services staff for doing the work. And I mean, for me, that's good leadership, but also it just shows the level of impact that having those advocates at that level can really help in terms of your visibility institutionally.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go to Katie, and then when Katie's made her comment, we'll cut to Karen for the next section.
Hi, so yeah, I'm an EAP professional, and Claire Toogood and I wrote one of the articles about our collaboration. So Claire is here as well, but she would teach human resource management, and we worked together on a module, and we shared our experience. But from my experience as an EAP, so English for Academic Purposes professional. It's often the collaboration as well, often depends on the subject lecturers being open to the collaboration. Some collaboration works really well, and me and Claire had a great experience, but other times like I've put myself out there and just get ignored. So I think that is, you know, where the collaboration works, it's often, sometimes you're relying on individual people, you know, rather than, and so we kind of felt that often it needs to come, it often works bottom up, but actually sometimes it needs, collaboration needs to be encouraged really top down, and that you have a real backing that this is important and you should draw on this excellent expertise of third space professionals, and it should come from the top, because it can be, you were talking about struggles, it can be a struggle. But yeah, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, that's true. Karen, I'll cut to you now.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you, Katie, for popping in. I had put in the chat a comment about your paper, which was exactly what that previous conversation was about, a really strong collaboration between academic and professional services. And so the next section we identified kind of leads rather neatly from that. I'm talking now about identity and positioning. And of course, identity is really core to the notion of operating in a third space. It's what Whitchurch meant when she started writing about it. I've got her little text here, reconstructing identities. And this section very clearly had people either struggling with identities, and we've kind of touched on that here, what's left after we're not an academic anymore. We're not quite a professional in as much as we're not finance people, we're not HR people, we don't have that profession behind us. We're in the gap in between the two. And so there's a struggle in there and certainly tensions in there. But there were also some papers in this section that are talking about the benefits of being hidden in that third space. And I was called to recall that really when I was reading some of Kelly-Louise's LinkedIn posts. And at one point you said there's a freedom in being able to publish whatever I like, wherever I like, because there's no pressure on what you write about or who you write it for, or even if it's a blog post rather than a top class journal, we can put whatever we like out anywhere. And so there was some celebrating that space and some people trying to create that space of flexibility. So I'm not going to chat too much. I could chat for hours about this particular piece, so I won't, because I'll use all our time. And there have been some comments in the chat that I think perhaps we could air here. And I'm thinking particularly about Melanie Beckett. You talked about loss of identity, and both Ralitza and Fallon, is it Fallon Lee or Lee Fallon? I can't tell because teams swap our names around all the time, have joined in that chat. So I wonder if Melanie, Ralitza or Lee would like to perhaps chat about how they are dealing with that loss of identity that they're chatting about. Melanie, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm conscious of time, I don't want to waste everybody's time, but my background is an FE lecturer where I taught A-levels for 13 years, so very hands-on in the classroom, loads of metrics and had to perform and all the rest of it. And I've moved from that now, having completed my PhD, into this third space role as an academic skills tutor. So I don't teach like I used to. I am still classed as a teacher. And other people do tell me that, you know, I'm offering benefits to the students, but because I don't see them all the way through to the end of the courses and I don't have to get them through exams, I don't really know what the impact of what I'm doing is. I get, we all get good feedback, you know, but it's not concrete, and I'm struggling to see the worth in what I'm doing, and I know I'm helping people, but I'm grappling with, I mean, I'm hoping it's going to help because I'm undertaking the fellowship qualification. I don't have that yet. So I'm going to use a lot of reflection on who I think I am now and what I'm doing and the benefit of my, you know, because I know all about the pedagogy and all the rest of it, but teaching now is completely different for me, and I'm just grappling at the moment. So I'm definitely going to get that that Reconstructing Identities Whitchurch book. I think that might help me figure some of this stuff out.
Lee.
Thank you.
I'm right, you're Lee rather than.
So I've got the kind of opposite experience to some extent, because I was part of the third space for a decade working in learning development, and left it and became an academic. And I think it's fair to say being in the third space is an identity in itself. So the loss of identity I have was leaving the third space to become an academic, but I actually gained everything that the previous speaker was just saying that they'd lost. So I have students, I've got belonging, I got access to a ethics committee and support for, you know, applying for funding. So the true irony is, now that I've left the third space, I finally have time to be scholarly engaged in the third space. And that's how I'm an editor for the Journal for Learning Development in Higher Education. I finally have the time. Now I'm no longer a learning developer.
Thank you, Lee. That's a really useful perspective. Relitza.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, having technical issues. Come turn the camera on. My experience is slightly different. So I used to teach molecular genetics. So I was a full-time academic, and then I switched over to the learning development side. And in the beginning, people used to tell me that, oh, you're very clever. Have you done a PhD in psychology? And I was like, right, this is a bit different. And they used to use those comments as almost like a little pat on the head, which, despite all my qualifications, all my publications, I think once you cross the border and you go on to the other side, then you're not a full-time academic anymore. They almost start thinking you're one of those people who haven't finished your PhD yet, or you haven't been successful. And that's why you're almost in the second-class carriage. Which is rather unfortunate. I have to admit, I've been a learning developer for over 10 years now, and I have seen a shift across the different institutions I've worked in. But when I started originally, it was like that, you know, either your PhD wasn't good enough or you weren't good enough. You couldn't cut it as an academic. So I'm sorry to hear other colleagues are still struggling, and I'm happy to talk to anybody in more detail about strategies and ways forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Relitza, and I wonder if it's possible for us to set up some sort of collaboration space, because there are quite a few comments in the chat where people would like to get in touch. I'm not sure how that could be done, but it could be a useful thing for us to do. And if we could just have Ragda's comment quickly before I then give back to Kelly to chat about our next theme.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what to add to this, but also as a software engineer, teaching software engineering for over 20 years, came to this during my PhD. I found in some universities, there might be focus on students and in others on academics, depending on your role. So wonder how you can prove your practitioner role as an educator or supporting education if you're focused on one of two. And this might be the reason behind loss of identity. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think accreditation's where we can go to try and address those sorts of issues. Kelly-Louise, over to you.
I'm in on that actually as well as we move on to the next piece, because I think it's a really, really important question. I'm dealing with it at the moment in looking at some stuff around visas for staff, and actually having to convince our immigration team that academics are our students, because we work in educator development in our context, and they're going, but they don't teach students. And I was like, but their students are academics. And so there is a kind of perception and identity change that is really needed across the board in that context. But I do think this leads us nicely onto the kind of the third theme, which is leadership, influence and credibility. And there's kind of lots packed up in there. And the credibility, I think, issue I've seen it coming out in lots of the comments in the chat and lots of the things that people have been saying. Because there is that, I can't remember who said it just now, but use the term second-class citizen. And there is, I was an academic for a number of years before I took on a professional services role, and there was an immediate kind of sense of that I was somehow a failed academic, and I felt that, even though I'd made a very active choice. not to want to be an academic anymore for lots of reasons that we won't go into here. But, you know, there is that sense of second-class citizen sometimes, I think, for folks. And there is a real sense of, how do I prove my value, worth and credibility to colleagues across the institution? And I was in a very challenging conversation with an academic colleague about a year ago who sort of made a fleeting comment in a meeting about why all these professional services people making decisions about education. And I sort of said, well, firstly, a lot of these people have been academics or have done PhDs or have high-level teaching qualifications, so they, you know, they are that. But, you know, your subject is computer science, say, that's your area of expertise. Mine is in teaching and learning and higher education. My particular area of expertise is in the teaching and development of doctoral students. And, you know, Karen has particular expertise in academic personal tutoring, but you know, it's trying to kind of develop that credibility by saying, actually, you know, law is your subject, computer science is your subject, history is your subject. This is mine, and this is where my expertise sit. But it's a really difficult position to own, and you need that kind of infrastructure and that support around you to give you that confidence. Somebody said in the chat, which I thought was really important, like confidence in what you do, but also to have those advocates. And I think a lot of what we do is we lead from behind the scenes. You know, a lot of what we're doing as learning developers, academic developers, but these kind of third space roles is we are trying to drive change in the institution in terms of learning and teaching and pedagogy from behind the scenes. You know, we talk a lot about all of the changes we want to make to assessment and assessment practice across the institution, and we aren't the kind of figurehead for that, but we are constantly driving and pushing. And so a lot of the change that we create is through influence rather than through that kind of direct leadership role. But I think, like I said at the beginning, one of the things that really came out of this special issue was the value that we could have in those sorts of leadership roles. There is a former head of academic development who is now the Vice Chancellor of Middlesex University. You know, that it's happening, that recognition of expertise and value we have in those roles. And admittedly, that's one, and it's a slow burn, but I think it shows the potential. And I think one of the things that really came across in the special issue for me is this issue of kind of super complexity in our environment. You know, universities are increasingly complex political, social and economical environments. And actually, to be effective as a leader in those sorts of environments, you need to be flexible, you need to be agile, you need to have good networks, you need to be a great collaborator, you need to be aware of the vast range of expertise and work that goes on in the institution to really make the most of and the expertise you have, but also to face, you know, the constant challenges, you know, whether it's a global pandemic, a cost of living crisis, and a financial crisis, and you know, whatever it is. These are really important skills, and we have them in this space, and we have them in spades. And that was really prevalent and palpable for me in the articles, particularly under this theme, but across the board. And I think it leads me kind of thinking about, like, you know, for folks on the call, what do we see of the kind of real that we think are really valuable qualities for senior leaders that we think we have in the third space? I think that collaboration piece is really one of them. And I read something just this morning of a senior leader who had said about having to take kind of ownership of work that they had done and put I, and saying, but it's never an I, because a good strategic leader is always working in collaboration with others and valuing their contribution. And just, I sat at my desk in my office, as I am, and just went, yes. In that recognition of that importance of collaborative working. So I wondered if anyone kind of had any reflections that they wanted to add about that, particularly about that leadership element and the skills that we could bring as third space professionals to institutional leadership. James.
So I should have said before when I was doing my bit, but I'm the University Librarian at Exeter. But I think just that leadership piece for me, as well as the kind of collaboration bit we saw, you'll find a lot in all the management literature around boundary spanning as a really important skill for leaders, to be able to work across boundaries both inside and outside the organisation. And I think that ability to collaborate, which third space professionals innately have, is one of those key leadership skills, and that ability to see multiple perspectives is what makes third space professionals potentially really effective leaders. And I think how we harness that in developing, to go to Kelly's point at the start, how do we get people in senior leadership positions? I think it is that collaboration bit and that ability to see multiple perspectives that makes third space professionals effective leaders.
Sorry, my team's a bit slow today. I think Ragda, you're next on my hand up list.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in my morning walk and this is why it's too noisy around me. Just to add to this, what in previous chat, I mentioned that we need a higher rank for learning developers and positioning as something critical and essential rather than ad hoc added to what teachers are doing. And ironically, I moved to a professional services that is not in the space of learning development, and it's more recognizing the work we do around designing. I'm currently a program manager, and if we are in a space that we are not surrounded by educators, we might be recognized more. And I don't know if that is some sort of resistance to what we do, because academics or leaders who are in the space of education think that our role is complementary, to what they do, and they are expert in that space. Being with academic or teaching experience definitely help in promoting that value and repeating that experience, just to make sure that it is heard and know that I came from where you are at now, and I think this could be working. I think it works. It really promotes a leadership position, or like positioning us in a better rank than what we are at now. Yes, thank you.
Thanks for that, Catherine. And I am actually delighted that it's you that we're chatting then, because I was going to call upon you in a second to talk more about the next theme and the final theme that we have identified, which is careers and professional development. And I think we've touched upon it in the conversation we've had so far, because of course it's really tricky. There are very clear career trajectories if you happen to have an academic contract of whichever kind. And in your professions, there are clear ways of developing, but the third space tends to have a bit of a gap. Sometimes it's less obvious how an individual can progress, or even how the job can be enriched for somebody who doesn't necessarily want to climb up a career ladder, but wants to have a fuller role. And reading through the comments in the chat, I noticed Tanya Liddon had mentioned that that's something that she's particularly interested in. And Stephanie Larkin, who, just the best title, careering into the third space, is actually in this section in the special issue. But then, Catherine, you talked about some staff development opportunities that you have put in place to try and address some of that careers and development. So, Catherine, I wonder, would you be able to just chat very briefly about that initiatives that you've set up? And maybe it would be great if Tanya or Stephanie could jump in and expand on their comments in the chat as well. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, I think Stephanie and I are from the same institution, and she's a brilliant colleague, so definitely would love for her to come in as well if that were possible. I suppose why I put up my hand was to do with the piece around skills, and I think what third space professionals are extremely strong on is translation. And just as an example, when we had a new kind of educational change initiative coming through, our lead at the time, who's now our president, had an academic and professional co-anchor on it. And it just meant that the professionals had the language of that transfer that's translated across discipline and then we could get the disciplinary examples to illuminate it. So it's just the two together as a collaboration were so effective. So that translation power. Anyway, that was what I was putting my hand up for. So Karen, you've asked me to talk about the professional development opportunities. So I'm the director of our Teaching and Learning Centre at University College Cork. I'm myself an administrative contract, and I have academic staff and professional services staff within the unit. In terms of staff development, we run formal programs in professional development and teaching and learning. And from the very, very early stages, my predecessor made sure that those were open to all staff that support student learning. This isn't the standard across the Irish sector, but in terms of what that has meant in terms of UCC, I think it actually recognises that the range of people and the range of spaces where learning happens, it's creating a common language and grammar around teaching and learning. And because we're encouraging people to kind of collaborate on projects, to write together, etc., I think it brings people in contact that maybe don't necessarily connect, but they connect via the program. It doesn't fix everything, but it's also saying that we value your work here and see your professional development being essential. So that's one thing I suppose to think about. Where it becomes challenging is where people may have different ideas about giving people some time out to do this work, or professional services staff, I just say professional staff, but giving them the kind of where they have sufficient teaching in both semesters to complete the assessment. So sometimes that's stuff to be navigated. We also ran a program 3 years ago at this stage, called Professional Practice and Leadership in Higher Education. And that was really developed to try and create a similar program that just looked at the policies, the processes, the cultural parts that shape higher ed, and how we as all professionals, whoever's working in the university, could think about our roles. But the challenge with that is that the staff that were the real experts didn't have a dedicated teaching time to contribute to it, and it's been hard to maintain as a consequence. So that's, broad stuff to cover.
No, that's great, and it's good to hear how that barrier is being overcome in practice. Are you a university that follows the Advanced HE Fellowship, or are you doing this?
No.
Yeah, quite a lot of Ireland doesn't.
In the established universities, the kind of progression pathways mean that research is kind of the more higher ranked thing, whereas in the newer universities, they don't have the same ways of advancement. So the fellowship, the Advanced HE Fellowship, is probably more attractive to them.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Catherine. And I can see Stephanie's put her hand up and turned her camera on. So great to see you, Stephanie. Join our chat.
Hi everyone. Hi Catherine. So I suppose to follow on maybe a little bit from what Catherine is saying. So I actually did the diploma in learning and teaching in our university, and that was a real catalyst for me in my role, and I suppose solidifying what I felt was my purpose and identity within my role and my department. And I talk about this a little bit in my article. One of the challenges, though, is in my role, there is no, like, the teaching aspect of it is kind of recognised, but I have no time and space to focus on the research. Like, my days are really packed with just practical work of meeting students, helping them get their placements, etc. And then there's no structure for me to kind of share that expertise that I have, wider within the institute. And I mean, I'm lucky in my department in that they're very focused on career anyway. And I think once I started being able to kind of articulate through, I suppose, programs that I did in my university and learning about this third space kind of and how it's conceptualized, I was able to find colleagues in my department who actually stepped into the third space with me, and we now work closely around career within the curriculum, within the degree. So that's been really helpful, but it did start with learning and teaching qualification within the institute. So, you know, so training and support are really, really, really critical to getting people off the ground, I think. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. And Tanya, you put the first comment in about careers way back at the beginning of this session.
Yes, I suppose just to kind of clarify, I guess my interest is particularly in career practitioners moving into the third space, and I guess from my experience, it's depended a lot on you know, promotion. From a promotion point of view, it's depended a lot on where the reporting lines are for that particular service. So if they're reporting into student services, for example, often the route through is actually to go up through that channel. And I think I'm beginning to see a few services align more behind teaching and learning, which I think is really positive, and that's coming through from the what Stephanie was talking about, which is, you know, contributing to employability in the curriculum, really, which is a great outcome. I've been really lucky, I think, because I've worked in 2 institutions. Well, I can't remember what I wasn't really thinking about promotion in the first one particularly, but the latter 2 both have accepted promotions through the normal academic promotion route. So at Warwick, for example, we have I'm on a teaching only contract, but I can get promoted through the normal academic promotions route, as can people, for example, in our academic development teams and other professional services teams. So it's really positive. I think on the one hand, it can be a bit clunky, and you do wonder whether things are being assessed in the same way. And we do, you know, have a bit of a moan about that on occasions. But at the same time, I think it is positive if institutions are considering putting people all on the similar promotion routes. I think, yeah, that was what I was going to add.
That's great. Thanks for that, Tanya. And I think we've run out of time for this little theme. So thank you for finishing it up for us, Tanya. And Kelly's hand is up, so I'm guessing she's going to round us up.
I am indeed, and come back in on that because I think it's a really interesting conversation. So I'm, you know, the head of a team of education developers, and I have lots of conversations with people in my team and other colleagues in the sector who are working in that kind of role. The last thing that in the world that they want is to be in my job. That's the obvious next step in terms of progression, but they don't want this kind of job because you're doing a lot less teaching, it's much more strategic work, it's much more meeting focused. I find it difficult, but I went in knowing that I wanted to play that kind of role in the institution. But I think the thing that I find frustrating is that I've got so many fantastic colleagues, some of whom are in my team, who are, you know, doing exceptional work and far beyond what would be a normal kind of lecturer grade, but there isn't a route for them to get that kind of formal recognition for that and progression without stepping out of that space into a more leadership and strategic role, which is not what they want to do. And I always think that it's really challenging to provide those, those routes. And I'm so pleased to hear, Tanya, that like those opportunities are available in other institutions, because I think it's the case with all of our institutions, right? If they can see another institution's doing it and it's working, they're more likely to listen to the argument of the value of it. So it's so great to hear that. As Karen said, we're coming to an end. We've not had much time, and we've had almost 130 of you join us at different times on this call. And, you know, I just wanted to say a huge thank you once again to the editorial team, the guest editors, but the team at JLDHE, and everyone that has contributed to the journal and to the discussion today. I think somebody said quite early on, the number of people on this virtual call at 12 o'clock on a Friday and the volume of contributions and excellent contributions that we got to this special issue really shows that there's more conversation. Like James said, this has started a conversation and there's much more to be said. And it will be really interesting to see ways that we can continue that, because I think that we've got a lot of the same experiences. We experience a lot of the same challenges. And I really think that we've got a huge amount of value to add. And I thought that before the special issue, and I know it now because I have the evidence, all 58 articles, I think, as my evidence. So yeah, just a huge thank you to all of you, because, you know, the thing that makes something like this is the community that we have in the sector of third space professionals. That's what really makes it. And that part of this has been an absolute joy and a pleasure. So thank you. And have good Fridays. Some of you I see from the chat, your Friday is just starting, or maybe your Saturday. So enjoy the rest of your days, and thank you so much again.